information or knowledge about the endocannabinoid system, how does that inform your work? What does it mean in a practical sense as a clinician?
So in practice, it's interesting, over years talking to patients, thousands and thousands of patients, you start to see this trend with people describing certain symptoms that you can then start tracing back to the endocannabinoid system. So whatever it was, whether it was an injury or an illness, inflammatory condition, some type of traumatic insult, patients have very similar underlying symptoms, such as, my anxiety's out of control, my sleep is terrible, I'm angry, I'm sad, I don't feel well, and it's kind of like this, the whole being is not well. It's not just, oh, it hurts right here. Now, we do get those patients too who have very specific, but what I have found is that for so many of the patients, that especially those with long time, what we call chronic ongoing conditions, and they've never felt well. And you ask when you're a doctor, okay, what have you tried? And people will kind of rattle off, oh, I've tried this and I've tried this, and they list all these medications, and I kind of joke around and say, okay, that's like saying I broke my toe and put a Band-Aid on my shoulder, right? You're not targeting the underlying system that is now out of whack, and that's your endocannabinoid system. And if you don't target that system, you're going to be taking medicine or doing things that are all around, but you're missing the target. And so when people come in and, for instance, they'll give you that symptomatology, you say, oh, that's your endocannabinoid system. And they're like, what? What are you talking about? I never heard of that. And it's unfortunate that doctors aren't learning about this. In my own family, I have a relative who has seen an orthopedist, a rheumatologist, an endocrinologist, a pulmonologist, and I kept saying, stop going, because all of a sudden you're now finding all these conditions, and really it was cannabis medicine that took care of everything. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be for everybody, but certainly when you're seeing that kind of progression without finding the answer, certainly you must think of the endocannabinoid system as the root cause.
I think there is some scientists from the NIH, National Institute of Health, that have stated forthrightly that all diseases are an expression of the dysfunction of the endocannabinoid system, which is quite something for basically a federal scientist to say. The link to cannabis prohibition is not made in this juncture there. Dr. McIlroy, you practice something called functional medicine.
Yeah.
So how does cannabis therapeutics fit in? What is functional medicine and how does cannabis therapeutics fit in?
Sure, and Dr. Knox actually gave a good definition of it yesterday. It's basically looking at the root cause and kind of going upstream to fix downstream problems, right? So a lot of the chronic degenerative diseases that we have in the U.S., diabetes being one of them, is there are ways that we can start at a foundational level, looking at nutrition, looking at other things that can really help play with the endocannabinoid system, acupuncture, osteopathic manipulation, certainly herbs and supplements, and then using cannabis, which is a beautiful and extremely potent herbal, therapeutic, but not a panacea. And so I think that we're seeing how strong and effective it can be, but really, I studied Chinese medicine on a master's level before I went to medical school, and it's in the Materia Medica from 2,000 years ago, not in the flowering form. It was more of the seeds and the roots, but this has been something that's been around for a long time, but always in a formula, right? This is really the first time cannabis, at least outside of the Eastern perspective, Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, are always looking at how do we craft a formula. And so I think, trying to work with that, acknowledging the terpenes and how the profile is coming together, but then also some other herbs and supplements, curcumin, which is from turmeric, right, which is a really potent anti-inflammatory, and how that can then weigh in with cannabis and cancer, and those play very well together. I work a lot with medicinal mushrooms like turkey tail, Trametes versicolor, also has some very strong anti-cancer effects that I think work synergistically, not necessarily in a specific formula, but with cannabis as part of an overall protocol. And so that's a lot of what I do, is utilizing cannabis as a primary driver, but then bringing in whether acupuncture treatments, osteopathic stuff, but then also a lot with other herbs and supplements. And really, I also am, the psychedelic renaissance, as you know, and have been a big part of, is happening right now too. And so I work with ketamine for treatment-resistant depression and other mood diagnoses, and I think the way that cannabis also can play with that, right? I mean, there's a way that if you have a little bit of cannabis with that ketamine, that changes the reaction and increases the potency of ketamine. So I think we're at this, the dawn of so many things that are coming out. We finally have recognized that cannabis is not just about treating symptoms, right? We really can get to more of the root cause of a lot of pathologies, but then what are other agents and adjuncts that we can use to create a better entourage effect, I think, overall. That's a lot of help.
I want to follow up one of the things that you pointed out about cannabis being, or hemp being part of Chinese medicine for thousands of years. And in terms of when you study Chinese medicine recently, what role, if any, how does it figure in?
No, that's a good question. So I went to school in the late '90s. It didn't, right? We had it in the herb pharmacy. It was, but that was the hemp seed, right? It was the seed only. And I don't think, because they weren't really using the flower, they used it a little bit more in North India as part of Ayurveda, but it was really, it was for constipation. Like, that was, if you look up the Chinese Materia Medica, the number one indication for cannabis sativa is as a oil that you're getting from the seeds. And so it was a little bit different. But, when you look at Chinese formulas, they often are, range to 6 to 8 ingredients would be a common number. And you have, a primary driver, a chief herb, and I think cannabis, any formula that you're going to put in it, it's going to be the chief herb, right? But then what can we add to that to again, sort of increase or elevate the entourage and the efficacy of the overall
I like to say that the endocannabinoid system validates plant medicine. Right? I think that's the reason why it was suppressed for so long, that we weren't taught that. Because it would force a departure from the conventional system as we know it. But beyond cannabis, which is maybe the most versatile plant that works on the system, we're speaking to botanical synergy. Right? We're learning more and more about these botanicals that have been used since really the beginning of time, and how we now can create formulations with cannabinoids as the primary, or the primary leading molecules, if you will, to create really powerful medicine and care.
Yeah, it's exciting.
I think cannabis has been referred to as an medicinal treasure trove by Dr. Mcllroy, who's identified the structure of both CBD in 1963 and THC in 1964. But that treasure trove, way more than just THC and CBD, which is the darling of the moment. Now CBD's the rock star therapeutically, or maybe even more than that. It's kind of crazy. If we can kind of move beyond the fad and look at other components of the plant, to what extent are they going to be real players? And I was going to ask you, Dr. Goldstein, what have you been finding, if anything, working with the so-called minor cannabinoids, or cannabinoids outside strictly CBD and THC, which do a lot, just those two, but I think there's more there.
So right now, I work with, of course, THC and CBD with patients, but I also encourage patients to use CBG, cannabigerol. Cannabigerol comes from CBGA, cannabigerolic acid, which is what I call the mother to all the other cannabinoids. It is now available, and I do have patients taking it. It has been, it's a well-known antidepressant. It's a well-known anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer. It stimulates bone for people who may have what we call osteoporosis. It's an analgesic for some people, and again, not everybody gets the same effects. But it is just like THC and CBD in that it has its own list of medicinal properties that may overlap. I often tell people you're going to do better with cannabis when you blend, and it goes right back to the entourage. So CBG in my pediatric population has been working really well for a lot of pediatric autism patients, in that one of the number one symptoms that parents will tell you is their child is highly anxious. So if you know any children with autism, you probably know this. Anything new, anything out of the ordinary, anything out of the schedule creates a lot of anxiety and creates a lot of difficulty in being able to just function throughout the day. And I add in CBG. In a survey, almost 2/3 of patients, families reported that just adding CBD to the already existing THC or CBD regimen reduced anxiety in these children. We're also seeing about 1/3 of these kids just adding CBD in low doses, by the way, somewhere between 2 and 20 milligrams. And remember, I say CBG, but in that bottle is hundreds of compounds. There's terpenes, there's other cannabinoids. Maybe it's something else in there, but by adding that in, we have about 1/3 of patients of nonverbal patients starting to speak. So we're starting to really see that. Adding in multi-layers. I actually have a patient right now who was born with what's called a disease of glycosylation. It's a very rare syndrome, like basically every cell is dysfunctional in her body. She was having hundreds and hundreds of seizures a day. On EEG, it just basically showed that she was seizing all the time. And at age 10, she made no eye contact. She was in a stroller and nobody had been able to help her. And this is now a girl who's 15, sitting up in a wheelchair, able to communicate on an iPad. And that's what cannabis can do. And I don't say that's going to do for everybody, but what is she taking? She takes 8 different oils, all mixed up, all low dose, 4 times throughout the day. And it's amazing. Her mom gets all the credit because her mom has been willing to mix and match and change things out. But it's made a big difference. When I first met her, I gave her CBD, and it didn't stop the seizures, but it helped with her alertness. She started to seem like she was more engaging. CBD did not stop her seizures. The EEG still showed a tremendous number. It was THCA, so raw THC, as you well know. That's what actually decreased her seizures by over 90%. So we must look at these other compounds. It cannot be all THC, all CBD, or that blend only. And when you look at products, and I love California for its freedom, we have all these products, but we need to start really exploring and looking into the other cannabinoids, because I really think it will help a lot more people who have not found THC and CBD to be the end-all be-all.
And I think that's where you're speaking to the uniqueness of cannabis. I mean, the pharmacy and a flower aspect of cannabis, where you're actually able to, like this mother is essentially taking 8 different chemovars and creating a formula, right? And I don't think that there's another Chinese herb or Ayurvedic herb out there that's going to be able to do this. But I think that it's really exciting to see the ways that we can do that with different chemovars, and then maybe other herbs and supplements along with it, right?
This is where endocannabinoid becomes really important. And really, endocannabinoid takes the focus off the cannabis plant specifically and puts it on that body. We know through a lot of research the pathophysiology that exists within the endocannabinoid system dysfunction. We can, for some diseases, we still have a long way to go, we can identify what cannabinoid receptors or non-cannabinoid receptors are upregulated or downregulated. What do those receptors do at that location in the body, whether it's on the eyeball or on the skin or on the scalp or in our digestive tract. And we can actually start to make very pragmatic recommendations about what phytocannabinoids should be the lead cannabinoid. And I think Bonni just demonstrated CBD and THC are not always the lead cannabinoid. You might need THCA or THCV, like in diabetes, or something that we haven't considered yet altogether. But I think that's what's most fascinating about how endocannabinology is pushing us to advance what we know about the science.
And I think that voyage of discovery, which is ongoing, and really exciting. Really exciting, and holds a great deal of, not just for little kids with these tremendously impairing conditions. I think cannabis, a lot about cannabis can be very helpful for a wide range of age groups, particularly seniors. And I'm wondering, in each of your practices, what are you finding? Is it really most helpful for kids? Could be most helpful for anybody? Maybe you can share some of your experiences.
It's been helpful for everybody. Our youngest patient was 3 months old, and I can't tell you what our eldest patient is, but we see the gamut. We see folks in all walks of life with a variety of needs, and with participation, right, the doctor and the patient working together to work through what we don't know yet, we are able to increase precision in how both the providers and the patients are experiencing cannabis use. I mean, I have not had a patient yet who's had to walk away because they haven't found something that hasn't worked for them.
Yeah, I think that speaks to the versatility of cannabis. It's almost always, at the very least, it's going to help a little, right? It's typically been my experience.
And not harm.
Yeah, exactly, and help a little and benign. At least close to that. I work with all age groups, but I do see mostly adults, and I work with a lot of seniors, and I think that's one of the areas where it works so well. And then when you juxtapose it to the pharmaceuticals we have, that really cannabis should be first, I think. So like insomnia is a perfect example. The medications we have, like Ambien and other drugs that have black box warnings for certain dosages, right? If we have something like cannabis, where we're able to start low and slowly titrate up, right? It doesn't have to happen that first day, but really give people the agency to kind of become their own, in conjunction with a clinician, hopefully, or oftentimes, be able to be their own physician and really work towards a dose that works for them. I think chronic pain is also a great one, right? I mean, I think that adding, leading with that, using THC and typically CBD for chronic pain, maybe first out of the bag, but then also if people are on opiates, that's also a way to help taper them off, and that's something that I do a lot in my clinical practice, is working with people that are on chronic high doses of opiates and want to get off, or being made to get off by regulations, and working with them with cannabis to help increase their efficacy, but also decrease their use of opiates, which is a lot more dangerous with the way that it depresses the brainstem.
Well, and I would agree. I have my youngest patient 6 weeks, oldest patient was 100. But in addition to this, something that's really important that I think that people should understand is that we are constantly changing. Children certainly are constantly changing, and if you find a regimen that works well for you, and then you start to kind of say, well, gee, you know what, my symptoms might be coming back, my sleep is a little bit off. Remember, give yourself a break. You are a changing person. We all have, and your endocannabinoid system changes with you. Right? Families that I take, let's pull back a little bit, reassess, see, and then reintroduce, because things have been working, and the reason they're in my office is because they lost effect. And so sometimes it's a matter of just trying to pull back from it and start all over. You really can't harm yourself with cannabis. I think the worst thing is that you might get a little anxious. You might sleep a little bit longer than you want to. So it's really so very safe.
Yeah.
I would imagine that in each of your practices, when you're dealing with people who are struggling with serious illness, they've either been through a pharmaceutical regimen that hasn't worked, or they're on it when they come to you. And is it generally a matter of using cannabis to wean off of the pharmaceuticals, or are there possible synergies between cannabis and FDA-approved pharmaceuticals? So, oftentimes people get into a bad, look, I'm going the natural way. I don't want to have anything to do with that, and they can end up dying because they could have benefited from a chemotherapy agent. Or it could be the other way. You won't hear about cannabis because that's just flaky stuff, and they're going to go all the way to their grave with these pharmaceuticals. How does it play out in each of your practices?
I'll start off. I think it's very individual. I think for some people, and I'm sure you guys can attest to this, there are families or people that come in and say, this medicine helps me. It's not my job to convince them to get off of that pharmaceutical. Now, if I think it's really toxic, I will give my opinion. And then I say, it's up to you, it's your body, and you get to decide what you put in it. But for some patients, so for instance, I do find that there's a population of, it seems, young men that have ADHD. And they have found that some of the ADHD medications help, and they're happy with the results during the day. They can function at school, they can go to work. But what they complain about is the insomnia and kind of the speedy side effects. They're not hungry. And so some patients are able to get off of those medications because the cannabis will actually treat the ADHD. But some patients find that they don't function that well, or cannabis does not work to help the ADHD. And so they use cannabis to counteract the unwanted side effects. And there's an example of where they can coexist.
And I think clinically our job as clinicians is to meet people or patients where they're at. with the tools that we have, right? And so I think that one of the things, certainly having the background in Chinese medicine, is I will have patients come and they're like, I want to do everything natural, and it's so clear that the allopathic answer is clean and definitive and is not long lasting. And I absolutely encourage someone to go that route, and then support them with the integrative medicine. And then I think conversely, sometimes clearly allopathic medicine has failed them, and then sort of opening the door to cannabis and other herbal therapies or integrative therapies that might actually give them better efficacy, but also open them up to something that they previously had never even heard of. I think that's a lot of our responsibility.
I think we have to think about two things as the clinicians. One is synergistic opportunities between cannabis and prescription drugs. We know that THC and CBD also work on the mu and delta opioid receptors. They create something called analgesic synergy when we use them together. That is why we are able to see patients reduce significantly their opioid burden or come off of them completely. There might be a really good reason for somebody to remain on a low dose of opioids so long as they have cannabis on board too, which we also know decreases the addictive risk of those opiates. Also for certain cancer types, we know that chemo and radiation therapy plus cannabis is more efficient and effective than either one alone. So in our clinics, then we see a lot of cancer patients. And in Oregon, it's a little different, right? We have a qualifying condition list. In California, it's really whatever condition your doctor thinks cannabis will benefit people who use it. So we actually get referrals from Oregon Health and Sciences University for cancer patients, and we have to have that conversation with them and tell them the truth. A lot of them want to get right off that chemo and radiation, and listen, we'll support you through that too. But what research is actually showing us is that you can get a lot more with both. And again, cannabis reduces significantly the toxicity of chemotherapy and radiation. And now number two that we have to consider, the number two consideration is drug-cannabis interactions, right? Depending on how you're consuming your cannabis, those phytochemicals, they're metabolized through that liver, might also interfere with the metabolism of prescription drugs. Therefore, it is our job. I don't expect the lay person to be able to make a determination, or the bud tender to be able to counsel somebody on potential drug cannabinoid interactions. That's our job to do that.
Hopefully they're not doing that. No, it's true. Yeah.
One thing, I'm just going to, a little controversy, what Rachel was talking about. So many of my patients who are taking opiates are being told that they cannot use cannabis at the same time.
Yeah.
The CDC has come out and said their recommendation is not to test chronic pain patients for THC. There's a synergy. Let them have their cannabis, but there's a study that shows that it takes 17 years for information to trickle down to your doctor, which is terrifying. So you may need to be the person that walks in there and says, here's the data. I'm just going to leave it with you and let you read that. Remember this very sensitive ego of doctors? Put it out there and say, hey, the CDC says, because I had a patient who had to choose between opioids through her HMO pain doctor that was like, she was at the end of the line, there was nobody else that would help her, versus cannabis. And she actually chose cannabis, but she had to go to rehab to get off the very high doses of opioids because it was going to take so long, and they wanted to cut her off within the month. It's really, the burden is on us and everybody here who you have the knowledge, you have the Google machine, print things out, share it with the doctors. In a very kind of friendly, what I would say a friendly way, and say, here is something, maybe you don't know this or maybe you do, but like, this is where I'm coming from. Because you want your doctor to be your partner. You don't want your doctor to be the principals shaking their finger at you, right?
And I think that's really important too, because the 17 years is without crowdsourcing, right? If you're a physician in LA or the Bay Area, I'm assuming Portland as well, it's like our patients are coming and saying, listen, this is what I'm doing, how can you help support me, or do you have additional information? Whereas I grew up in Southern Indiana, it's a very different thing, I'm sure, if I went back to where I grew up. So I think that that's really important. This really is a group effort that we're doing for the health of everyone, right? But I think also that individual patient physician-clinician relationship, it can be very much driven by and influenced by what you all bring to us, and so it's appreciated.
I'm going to pose one more question for the panelists, but I would invite people in the audience to ask questions. We have a unique opportunity here, at least for 10 or 15 minutes, to take advantage of it. My last question, microbiome. It's hot now. And people are talking about how this is really formative and very important as a factor in many different diseases. We know the old saying, all disease begins in the gut. I'm wondering, in terms of your experiences as clinicians involved with cannabis, and the information that's starting to come out now about the endocannabinoid system's role in terms of the microbiome and translating what's going on in the gut to the brain and vice versa. How is it figuring in your practice? What's going on now in the discussions about this?
Yeah, I was going to pitch to this guy because he's a functional medicine expert. We take a functional approach to endocannabinology, so inherently we're addressing digestive health. Really, the endocannabinoid system might actually be the link between our gut and our brain, that whole gut-brain axis, and how the microbiome plays into that is going to be very fascinating. We're just now delving in my practice with my family, we're delving into trying to really understand to the best that we can the physiology of that gut-brain connection through the lens of the endocannabinoid system. So I hope to be able to contribute more to that conversation into the future. But functional endocannabinology still begins with nutrition. When you come into our clinic, we teach the very nature of the endocannabinoid system being dependent on the very foods that we're eating. Right? We talk about high-fat diets, a ketogenic diet. And Bonni, I'm sure you could speak to that too in your patient population, how beneficial a ketogenic diet is for autistic kids and kids with epilepsy. But we know that to make our own endocannabinoids, we need to consume omega-3, omega-6 fatty acids that comes from our diet. We need to eat natural foods. All of our heavily processed foods are disrupting the microbiome and a whole other host of inflammatory processes. So I could throw cannabis at you all day long. I could throw other botanicals at you all day long and create this beautiful botanical synergy that we keep talking about. But if you are not addressing your nutrition, which is literally the most fundamental method of influencing the endocannabinoid system, we're not going to get very far.
I think that's a beautiful response, and I do think that while not all, the majority of disease does start in the gut, and so whether you're approaching that from an Ayurvedic, a Chinese medicine, or functional medicine, it's really about the microbiome. That's what the name they're giving it, and so feeding that with prebiotics, probiotics, right? It's similar to cannabis medicine. There's so much we don't know, but clearly having GI, gut inflammation, and then how that can lead to an increase in autoimmune expression, a lot of other things. We always want to make sure that that's being well nourished from the get-go, and the reason that it's so dysregulated at this point is that we're a grand experiment right now, right? I mean, what we're doing from the standpoint of blue light exposure from our iPhones late at night to eating processed food, to being so far from where we evolved from, that we're causing a lot of dysregulation. And I think that that's one of the ways that, yes, you do need to have that from a foundation perspective, like cemented in, but it's also what cannabis is such a beautiful addition to pretty much every condition, because it helps to further that process along. So I do focus a lot on the gut, but I think that cannabis can be an integral part of that.
I think that's well said, and I don't have much to add, other than I really believe that back in the 1930s and 1940s, when this plant was taken away from us, our health was taken away. I think that if we had the freedom from that time forward to grow cannabis, it would have been part of our everyday diet. So I live in LA where everybody's walking around with a green drink, right? What should be in that green drink? Cannabis. And you can't go into a juice place.
Sometimes it is.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it might be, but if you're getting it at a place, you walk into these, organic juice places, they are not allowed to dispense cannabis, so it's still being held back, and we still are living under some prohibition, as you all well know. And I really think that what you can look at when you look at thousands and thousands and thousands of years of human health, really, when did it all fall apart? And it came along with processed food and the growing practices with companies like pesticides and all of that, but and also the removal of this beautiful plant from our diet.
Who would like to ask a question? We should bring some other voices in. We have about, we don't have that much time, but let's make the
Thank you very much, doctors. I had a question quickly for Rachel. I agree with everything you said, and I'm really happy that we're all here together and talking about this. So thank you all for being here. I think on behalf of everybody, can we give them a round of applause? Thank you. I was hoping I could ask one question with 3 parts. We could get a little nerdy for a second around where the latest research is showing the endocannabinology, the A and the B systems within the GI tract versus the central nervous system. And so this is one question. I'm just hoping you can describe, both in lay terms and perhaps in neuropsychological, neurotransmitters, however you think the AB is working. Part A.
I don't understand.
Okay, the question is, can you please describe the current research as you understand it, operationally in your physiology of how the endocannabinoid system works? As I understand it, there's the A and the B receptor sites.
Type 1.
I would just love to hear your description of it, because there's multiple descriptions of it.
How I describe
Okay,
it.
that's part A.
Okay.
Part B is how many cannabinoids are currently listed. I've heard different from 25 to 40 to 100. Now I've heard 160 derivations of different cannabinoids within the single plant. Okay, so that's part 2. And then part 3 is, it's such a nascent new science that is it possible influencing this overall response that we're having?
Yeah, so some of us are moving away from talking about the endocannabinoid system and really talking about the endocannabinoid known, right? Because we do now, 2019 moving 2020, know that the endocannabinoid system is much bigger than these 4 core components that we often talk about. The cannabinoid receptors, the endogenous cannabinoids, and the enzymes that create them, and the enzymes that break them down. It's much more varied and nuanced than that, and not only that, our endocannabinoids work on many other receptor systems. So we used to only call CBD the promiscuous molecule because it works on 65 unique and counting receptors and other enzyme targets, but really all phytocannabinoids do, and also our endocannabinoids. So anyways, the system is not just the system, it's a whole universe inside our body, and we do not yet know if there's something even preempt and of course we don't know what we know yet, but a rudimentary understanding of the endocannabinoid system is that it's a retrograde feedback loop system, right? It's constantly adapting and reacting to internal and external stimuli, like Dr. Goldstein said, we are constantly in flux, right? Our endocannabinoid system tone can change depending on a whole host of circumstances, but its purpose is balance, homeostasis, so it has to work, when needed and wherever it needs to in the body to re-regulate, right? And so we commonly describe how that retrograde function works, and I don't have my charts and things to illustrate, I'll do my best. Using the example of a nerve synapse, right? You have a presynaptic nerve and a postsynaptic nerve, and that presynaptic nerve is sending signals of, stress, inflammation, pain, whatever, to that postsynaptic nerve. What is supposed to happen under healthy conditions is that postsynaptic nerve, right, in that nerve is produced our endogenous cannabinoids that are supposed to be released and bind to a cannabinoid receptor, the presynaptic terminal, and shut that signaling off, right, to maintain balance. So the way we like to describe it is if those signals are ongoing and aberrant signals of pain, inflammation, stress, yes, the body needs to have an innate mechanism to shut it off so that we don't now have chronic pain, chronic stress, chronic inflammation, which unfortunately is what's happening, right? That's what we believe is at the root cause of endocannabinoid system dysfunction. It's sort of a dysregulation, but we're causing it.
You should have that fun to someone else.
Thank you. Can you comment on how many cannabinoids you believe?
There's over 100, maybe there's 140 phytocannabinoids, right? Endogenous cannabinoids, we don't really have that number yet. We know that there's more than CB1 and CB2 receptors, 3, 4, 5. We know that there are secondary endocannabinoids, all their funky names. Like I said, this system is way more robust.
We'll talk to you next year about it. We'll have more info.
All right.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you guys, thank you so much. You doctors are particularly skilled. Most doctors are not required to know anything about cannabis or the endocannabinoid system. How do we change that? How do we make it required, continuing, or medical school education?
It's a great question. I've been working on it for years.
How can we help
The
you?
problem is, I was at a big meeting at a university that now has a cannabis research institute in Southern California, and actually someone that was here yesterday who was moderating a panel raised her hand. She was at the same meeting, and she said, when are we going to incorporate endocannabinoid system education into, and the answer from the guy leading the way said, the curriculum is full, we don't have time for it. So until we, and so one of the things that I started doing is I started offering just a free lecture to residents and interns at local hospitals to try to at least get those guys on board, let them hear about it, let them learn about it. It's a big problem.
17 years.
I think we have to make it a law.
Well, but I think it's exactly that. I mean, we do the best we can with what we have in the moment. Like I gave a talk on like Cannabis 101, a primary, to 60 family doctors and nurse practitioners in my department. Earlier this year, I spoke at the University of New Mexico, which was actually one of the first, I think, cannabis symposiums put on by a college of medicine, and it was New Mexico. I don't know how many people were there. Not one of our populous states. There were like 300 clinicians, nurses. So it's happening. And could it be better? Absolutely.
It's
But
not for the lack that the doctor on the ground doesn't want to know. It's that it seems to be that the people creating the curriculum, it's almost like our politicians creating the laws are not in touch with the people.
Yeah, so that's the reason why I'm on the Oregon Cannabis Commission. It was high time, pun very much intended, that somebody who specialized in this science was at the table when folks were making decisions about the industry, about medicine. I don't know if you all are aware, but our governments are not supposed to influence the practice of medicine. So by virtue of that, it's statutorily, like in Oregon, we're told what conditions we can see patients for. It should be unlawful. And I'm waiting for class action lawsuits from our peers to go forth, but we operate in a very fear-based system. So it's going to begin with peer-to-peer education. Doctors like learning from other doctors. We have to somehow find, and we've never done this before very well, to collectively act in our own favor, right? We talk about putting patients first, but how can we put patients first if we're not equipped to do so?
Exactly.
In Oregon, I still have OHSU reporting patients' cannabis use to law enforcement specialty boards. And creating a group. We have now the Oregon Cannabis Clinicians Group, which is an interdisciplinary clinicians group. I mean, chiropractors, naturopaths, etc., who care about cannabis as medicine and their right to discuss that information with their patients. And we're going to collectively act and put pressure on our governing agencies to change some of the ways they penalize us, scare us into practicing outside of our best interests. It is my belief that we doctors have a due diligence to, without bias or religiosity about this plant, objectively understand the endocannabinoid system and the pharmacology of cannabis, so that when you come to see us, whether it's like in the emergency room or in surgery, where the anesthesiologist very much needs to know if you took it, can make responsible decisions about what to do next with everything else we're trying to recommend for you. So we have no excuses. We're beyond that. We can no longer hide behind the veil of prohibition. People are using it now. It is our job as doctors, again, without bias, to take care of the person in front of us. So we're just going to have to be, inevitably, we're advocates. We have to be, by the nature of what we do. So I just hope that, I know you guys can hear my passion. I really hope learning researched in 1937, it was ignored. We've got to be just emblazoned about this and again collectively act to push this, move the needle forward. We have to.
patients will too. In some ways, it's a
And just one quick follow-up with that. There is actually a precedent case, it's called Cannabis versus Walters, you can look it up, where physicians have protected speech. We are allowed to talk to, this is federally, we are allowed to talk to patients about cannabis. So if a physician ever says, I'm not allowed to talk to you about that, inform them about Cannabis versus Walters. It protects us. We're not allowed to make claims that are, like I'm going to reverse aging, but I'm allowed to talk to you whether I feel cannabis may be appropriate for you.
Thank you.
Next question. Does someone have a question?
Yeah, I have one.
Oh, he's got it.
Well, schizophrenia, since you're working with children, teenagers, etc., is there a link? Because they put that out just yesterday. They're going back to that old canard that there's a link between THC and schizophrenia, or is it, it just wasn't, it's already pre-morbid, early onset, and wasn't caught? Like, do you do an evaluation for mental health, whatever?
I think it's a good question to end on. So who wants to comment?
I can comment on that. So it appears that the studies show that there is and remember, studies are not the end-all be-all. You have to remember that. There is bias within studies. So, I always tell people, it's not just one study that equals the answer, right? So we have to look. And in fact, something just came out I saw recently that showed, remember when I was growing up, they used to scare kids from smoking pot by saying, oh, you won't be able to have kids, it lowers your sperm. Right now, there's a study came out this year that says it actually increases your sperm. So now we have two studies, and they don't, right? But with schizophrenia, it appears that there may be something to early use, we're talking early, 12, 13, 14, heavy use, with a predisposition in a first family member, so your mother specifically, or somebody in that immediate family that already has schizophrenia or some other form of severe mental illness. And what we're talking about too, though, is you're talking about unopposed THC use, right? When you're 12, 13, 14, you're not abusing CBD, you're not abusing CBG or the raw cannabinoids, you're smoking THC-rich cannabis. Something I've always said is, is the 12, 13, 14-year-old medicating something that exists, right? Maybe they're already feeling anxious. Maybe they're already feeling some type of mental angst, and they're seeking it out because they are not expressing it, or nobody's identified yet what's going wrong. And certainly in that, I do get 12-year-olds that have severe anger issues, have been diagnosed with bipolar and all kinds of things. I'm not going to not treat them with cannabis. I'm just going to treat them with a balanced cannabinoid regimen that's going to include, of course, good nutrition and all of that. But additionally, THC is going to be part of it. It's just not going to be the chronic heavy THC only. So I think that this idea that you can't treat patients with schizophrenia with cannabis is untrue, and I don't think that we should use scare tactics. We should ask kids who are using cannabis, why are you using it, and how can we help you use it as medicine instead of using it? What does a 12-year-old know about medicating?
I have a similar approach, and I think one of the things too, it's like those of us who've been doing this for a while, you'll have patients come in with the diagnosis of schizophrenia on medications, but they're using cannabis and saying that this is actually what keeps me on the level, right? So it's a lot more complicated. I think none of us are also telling our 15-year-olds that are coming in for a well child check to go out and start using cannabis, right? So I mean, it's obviously more complicated, and you've got to weigh the
It's the underlying endocannabinoid system. So in that child who's showing symptoms, well, certainly that would be a person that you might treat with phytocannabinoids, whereas I just tell, if you're healthy as a teenager, just like leave your brain alone. I mean, I'm the mom of a 19-year-old. I told them, leave your brain alone, you're healthy, you got a good brain, just leave it be until it's a little bit older, that's all, because we don't want to mess it up. Yeah.
Maybe a final word from Dr. Knox, if you'd like to.
I ended with my final word. Does it apply? No, I talk about endocannabinology a lot because I really developed around the endocannabinoid system find something more preeminent in the endocannabinoid system. But in medical school, we learn systems. And we learn those systems in silos. And what the endocannabinoid system is demonstrating is that it's all connected. So I would really love to see an endocannabinoid system top-down approach to all our commonly known subspecialties. I mean, listen, you can be an OBGYN specializing in the endocannabinoid system, right? We know, and I mentioned this yesterday, that to get pregnant and down or prevents the breakdown of anandamide while you're trying to get pregnant if you are struggling with infertility. It's going to be the endocannabinologist who understands the natural function of the endocannabinoid system and also the distance. So I do think that we are at the beginning, right? That we are really pioneering this basic field of endocannabinology. I do think with the right pressures and the advancing science, we will have a case for changing the paradigm of the conventional medical system as we know it, which also beckons us to truly integrate what we know about Ayurveda and ancient Chinese medicine practices, etc. I think we are going to have a truly integrative medical system at some point.
Which is best for patients.
It's best for patients. It's best for all of us.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I want to thank the panel. This has been great. Dr. Bonni Goldstein, I know there's other questions and you'd like to speak to them. Bonni will be at the other end of the hall signing books, so will I. You're welcome to join us and to continue the conversation. And thanks for being here. More come. Appreciate it.
Okay.
I'm gonna go get their autographs in my books. But
Nice
the books
finish.
are good. The books are good.
My phone
but Dr.
died.
Bonni,
Can I get a copy from you? Sure. It's going to be on Reefer Revolution Live on YouTube.
Yeah. But yes.
But yes.
Can I get original so we can edit?
It's the only way it's going to be. I'm not actually recording it on my phone, so it's actually only
Awesome.
going to be the YouTube copy. But I can send it. But I can definitely send it to you. Absolutely.
I gotta write it down.
Reefer Revolution Live.
Here. You have a card too.
Yeah, give me that so I can show you.
Whoop, whoop, whoop. Hey, Dr. Barry.
Are you Bay Area based? Yes. Oh, hey! That was unbelievable.
Good one, right?
Oh. You don't hear all that expertise up there very often. What I will say, the good news is the pain management world is moving a little bit.
Yeah.
In the early days, we would have these pain guys, do that every day. Now we see it, but not nearly as often. Bonni, as you know, is blended.
All right. Shutting down for now. We'll be back.
Stood up and said a whole bunch of